We're live.
Nicely done.
So we just wanted to get together. We've been talking for a while about Bird by Bird. I think we're going to do intros real quick. I'm Zach. I run Inkdrift, the Inkdrift Substack, and I'm serializing my novel Rainbow Station on my Substack, as well as running Story Syntax, which is talking about programming and writing and the similarities that are there. Simon, do you want to go next?
Sure, yeah. Hi, I'm Simon. I do the Write More newsletter, and I've been serializing something called Tales from the Triverse for over 3 years, which has been going forever. But I'm going to finish it this year, I promise. I keep saying this. But yes, that's me. You can find me simonkjones.substack.com. And yeah, these guys introduced me to Bird by Bird, so I'm very excited to talk about it. And Tim.
Thank you. Yes, yeah, I'm Tim Hall. I write at the moment under TK Hall. My newsletter is Wildwood Rising, and these are my novels: Shadow of the Wolf and Dark Fire for now. And then there's a third one coming out in May called Wildwood Rising, same as the newsletter. And they're published by David Fickling Books, and they're a rewriting of the Robin Hood legends, a sort of dark mythic take on the Robin Hood legends. And I've been reading sort of craft books all my life, it seems, and I've never come across Bird by Bird like Simon. I think he hasn't been out all that long in the UK, but that introduced us to it, and I'm very glad he did, because it's a fabulous thing. I really enjoyed it. It's my joint top craft book of all time. Look forward to talking about it more.
Yeah, I mean, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? Because something I noticed is it came out in the early 90s in the States and only came out in the UK in 2020, which is a weirdly long lag time. I don't know why it took so long.
Yeah, I mean, I've read this book at least 5 or 6 times at this point. Pretty much whenever I go through a slump in writing, I usually try and reach for my copy, just because I find it so useful in terms of being able to kick you out of slumps. But it is interesting that it took so long for it to get from the US to the UK.
Yeah, and I think the two things that I found particularly interesting about the fact it was written quite a while back and then it just came out is that it feels simultaneously very much like a product of its time. There's a lot of references to American culture that just went like over my head, partly because it was American, but also because it's American and 30 years ago, or whatever it is. But at the same time, it feels completely relevant and hasn't really dated at all. And I found those two things like really fascinating straight off.
Yeah, I think one of the things that immediately struck me as a little bit antiquated in a way is she talks about using index cards to keep track of interesting things or just notes. And I guess most people would probably use like a notes app or something like that for keeping track of that stuff. Simon or Tim, do either of you do that? Is that how you guys like keep track of stuff in a notes app, or do you actually use index cards?
Yeah, well, we've kind of talked about this in the past, haven't we, Tim? We're kind of polar opposites in terms of our use of tech and stuff. So, do you want to go first with how you do things?
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm very much represent the low tech end of the scale. So I do have bits of paper and notes and notebooks scattered all over with various thoughts and jottings in them. I don't think I use them in the same way that Anne Lamott recommends. You know, she's talking very sort of granular in a way, isn't she? I think almost like a poet taking very close shots of people's behaviour and that sort of thing. And I absolutely give all credit to that approach. I think I would probably swamp myself a bit too easily with that sort of thing. So I won't go into that. Having said that, sometimes if I'm out on a walk, if with the books I've been writing, there's a lot of nature detail in them. So often I will just jot down something that's a particular bit of colour or something like that.
And if you're out for a walk, Tim, do you do that onto your phone or do you have bits of paper with you? Or
Do you know, I'll tend to do that when I get home. Actually, yeah, because I do more running than I do walking, so it would be practically difficult to take notebooks. Yeah,
Yeah.
I sometimes feel like I'd be nice to use a sort of voice app or something like that
Mm.
to record some thoughts, but at the same time, it'd probably come out as absolute nonsense. So probably best I don't.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for me, like the index card equivalent is basically my Scrivener project file, which is this enormous ballooning mad thing. That if anyone else looked at it, they'd be like, "What the hell is this? This makes no sense whatsoever." But it. Just kind of expands and expands with notes all over the place and different plot things and ideas that come to me. And but then, yeah, if I'm out and about or if it's at some random time, I will sometimes just jot something down on my phone and then transfer that over when I get home. But yeah, it's kind of it's basically the same thing, isn't it? It's like you have a sudden thought, often at a really inconvenient moment, and then you've got to put it somewhere, otherwise it's gonna like fly away.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I usually keep a notebook on me. I actually don't have it on me right now, but I usually keep one that I just like jot anything down in. And then I'll frequently like I'll go back and flip through it and be like, I have no idea what I meant by
Yeah,
this, but at some point maybe it'll be useful.
yeah, and I think as much as anything else, it's a bit of a clearinghouse, that sort of thing, isn't it? There's
Yeah.
a very good book out recently called The Expanded Mind, where the author was talking a lot about getting things out into the physical world. Just otherwise, things can get. And I think writing in general. I think we'll get to some of the things that Anne Lamott talks about in terms of why we write, and I think a large some of it can be a sort of a processing. Actually, Simon, you talked about it recently. I think when you're taking in a lot of bad news, for instance, from the media, you're kind of processing it and freeing up space for the next thing. And I think that's one of the really sort of valuable psychological um,
Mm.
advantages of writing in general. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I go a bit strange if I don't write. I think it is a way that I feel like having a good sleep. It's one of the things my body does to like work through things, and if I can transpose it into like a fictional context,
Hmm.
it makes the real world slightly more slightly more bearable, or I can get my head around it in a different way.
Yeah, I know Simon, you and I had chatted about that when I was not writing for a little bit, sort of towards the end of last year, while I was waiting for the pilot season to go up and waiting for people to decide what I'd be writing on for this year. And it's definitely, I definitely feel more anxious, more pent up if I haven't written for a while, especially if I'm in between projects or in between chapters of something. It feels like I don't know, I just feel off in a strange way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yes, I think it's reassuring to hear that in a way because you can always feel like it's only you who needs these. But yeah, they're all forms of, I suppose, I keep using that word processing, but there's a sort of a clearing that feels like it's going on, and an ordering too. I suppose it's I
Mm.
tend to think there's a greater coherence, which seems odd when we're making fantasy worlds, particularly. It's it doesn't feel like we're kind of ordering our reality, but there's something going on there that I don't think I've never quite got to grips with what's going on, of course, because it's a very mysterious thing, isn't it? But it certainly experientially it feels better, doesn't it, to be moving these things through.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I've never felt particularly eloquent when it comes to politics and social issues and things like that. I'll think about them a lot, but I'm not very good at
Oh,
it's definitely the way I like to go. That seems to be the way my brain can process that kind of stuff more easily.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And there's a great chapter in Bird by Bird, isn't there, where um, Anne Lamott is talking about having sort of finding the reason that you write. Um, uh, where she's talking about themes essentially and having a theme that really means something to you. And I think that's connected to that. In fact, you have to sort of feel these things very strongly, and then and as you say, if I can't express them any other way than put them in a story.
Mm.
yeah, I mean, I think we sort of talked about this when we did our initial meeting to talk about this. Tim, you said that you had been working on another project and you sort of realize that there was nothing deep within that project that really resonated with you and made you feel like you wanted to keep writing. And that's definitely something I have felt as well. And that Anne Lamott talks a lot about is you have to sort of be focused on, in a strange way. I never think about the themes of my book, but you do sort of have to have something at the central heart that you're sort of trying to make come into focus in a strange way. Um,
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly it, and it doesn't. I think it's yes, it's good. Her great chapter is called "The Moral Point of View," isn't it? And
mm,
she talks very eloquently about that, and I feel like it doesn't even necessarily have to be. As I say, we probably all have a problem with the word moral, as she points out, but it can even be a view on art, can't it? It can be, oh, fantasy novels aren't quite what I want them to be, and if as long as you feel that strongly enough, you want to make something new, you want to react against something. But yes, I feel like it works even better, or it gives the story a real heartbeat if it's something you really care strongly about. And as she says in that chapter, there's certain universal things that we all care about, and tapping into one of those, you can feel it
Mm.
happening, can't you? And conversely, I think you can feel it when it isn't happening. The last thing I started to write, and it was fine. You could read it and you could probably believe it, but it just seemed to sort of lack soul, and that's why I didn't. There was nothing in it that I could really get behind.
Yeah, I remember as a younger writer being obsessed with plot, and I used to think that plot was everything, and that if you had a complicated, really clever plot, people would like the book, and that it would work. Because when you ask someone like, "Oh, what was that story about?" they always tell you about the plot. Um,
Mm.
and it was only quite when I was a lot older that I sort of shifted over to thinking about the themes of it and like what the point of it is and why do I actually care. And the plot's actually not that important at all. um, and reading Bird by Bird, I found it quite reassuring because I was like, oh yeah, that is, she's describing where I finally got to. And actually, Zach, I don't know when you first read this, but obviously we've only been able to read it now, partly because you told us about it and because it's only recently come out. But it came out in 1994, and part of me was like, if I'd read this in 1994, I would have accelerated my progress as a writer so much more. Instead, I just like fumbled my way through it for like 25 years, not really understanding what's going on. So I've kind of come to this book after the fact almost, and it's almost like I'm reading and going, "Oh, okay, I'm not doing it completely wrong. That's good."
yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's really useful in the book that she talks about, or that the book is sort of trying to do, because as we sort of talked about, every book is sort of trying to do something. And I think Bird by Bird, in a lot of ways, is sort of saying like, no matter what your success as a writer or anything like that, it's worthwhile to spend time as a writer, even if you end up making no money off of it, even if you make a, you don't end up becoming a world famous writer. It's actually a worthwhile pursuit anyway, because you just get so much joy out of it and you see the world in a different light. Um, and so it's really about like living a writerly life. That's
Mm,
sort of the way that I think about that book. Um,
I think you're dead right, and that is the best thing. I mean, there's so many great things about this book, but that is the best thing of all. Is it's wonderfully encouraging in terms of the process of, like you say, the things to be gained from writing the writing life, and the way to live the writing life is because my other favourite book that we talked about briefly, Zach, is Becoming a Writer by Dorothea Brand. It was written back in the 60s, and again, it's really showing its age in many ways, and yet again could have been written yesterday in that it's very much about the psychology of writing. And she talks all the way through about how no amount of technical training is going to do you any good until you essentially conquer the psychological side of writing, which is in Anne Lamott's book, Bird by Bird, it's very much perfectionism and getting out of your own way, allowing yourself to write those first drafts, those first drafts that don't work very well. It's that's the stuff that we need as an absolute foundation, and then later on we can be tinkering with the technical side of things.
mm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think Simon, sort of going off of your point of the fact that I've sort of had access to this book for a lot longer, and I've been reading it over and over again since I was probably 12. Um, and I think I find something new in every time I reread it. And there's different chapters. Like this one, the moral point of view that Tim was sort of talking about really stuck out to me. But another thing that stuck out to me the previous time that I'd read it, probably more than a year ago, was perfectionism and really trying to get out of your own way and really just trying to get it down. So even though I've had access to it for a while, I think there's just like infinite lessons to be learned out of it in a weird way. Um, yeah,
And I think there is probably is it's probably a truism that we have to make our own mistakes anyway. I think that no matter the beauty of a book like this is it gives you that framework and it gives you that encouragement that you're not the only one. And yet you can read these things over and over, and you'll go and make this mistake anyway. Because I think we kind of have to do to learn it properly
Yeah,
to really absorb the lesson. I'd say
yeah,
I first read Dorothea Brand's been my sort of equivalent of this, becoming a writer. But when I read it right at the beginning of my writing journey, and it meant nothing to me whatsoever. I thought, what do you mean? She was talking about getting into a writer's trance and all these. And I was like, well, I want to know about what a good sentence is and what a good structure and a good plot, like you're saying, Simon. And I want to know about, yeah, turning points and all these sort of technical things. But whether only when I came back to it later and I'd already made all the mistakes she was talking about, then I was like, oh, I see. Yeah, I blundered into all those traps she talked about. And I could have,
yeah,
yeah, she told me they were there and I went and fell in them anyway.
yeah, exactly. And to find kind of your own versions of them, don't you, as well?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I think something I found really good about Bird by Bird is that like Anne Lamott's not just laying down a load of rules and telling you like here's how you do it, like 1, 2, 3. It's very much a personal take on it. You know, there's is as much autobiography in here as there is writing coaching, but that's what gives it useful context because you can kind of adapt it to your own way of writing and your own way of living because you understand where she's coming from. Whereas the more kind of prescriptive stuff, which you see a lot of this online, don't you? It's like, here's how you do this. It's like, oh, okay, and then you try and apply it to yourself, and it just doesn't fit because there's no kind of hard and fast rules to this stuff. Whereas, yeah, her approach is to get to know her, and then that gives you an understanding of why she's saying what she's saying.
Yeah, it's a very good
yeah,
point. Actually, I hadn't really exactly thought of it like that. The better writing books you come across, like Stephen King's On Writing, and
sure.
what I talk about when I talk about running, those, yeah, they're full of autobiography, aren't they? And like you say, that gives you somewhere to stand.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think um, it's funny going back to what you were saying about having to make your own mistakes. I think she has this whole section in one of her books where she talks about redrafting a book. Like she takes the book to her agent, and her agent says this is not ready, and she goes through multiple stages of like editing it, and she talks about each of those stages. And then she talks about going to writing classes and her students asking her to bring in this manuscript that was sort of like the little manuscript that could, right? And showing it to them, and they all think they're going to get something out of seeing this manuscript that's sort of been put together and pieced together over time. And she's like, I don't really think that they get anything out of it because it really, and I think really it requires like doing it yourself to really understand how that works.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, and because it's again, it's all process, isn't it? You have to do it and do it again and do it again. Um, like learning to play an instrument or whatever it is, you have to. It's the iteration, and you that each time that will be unique. I've heard a saying once: you can't learn to write novels; you can only learn to write the novel you're writing. And I think
Yeah.
that, yeah, they'll all have their individual challenges, and you've got to get over those hurdles one way or another, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have some questions here. One question that I had, and this is specifically for Simon, but I was curious. as you were reading this book, if you thought that there were certain things that didn't apply or didn't work as well for writers who are serializing their fiction the way that you have with Triverse and the way that I am with Rainbow Station.
Yeah, I think in terms of the sort of nuts and bolts of the craft, and how characters and plot and theme and all that kind of stuff fits together, that was all superb and applied very, very easily to what I do. I suppose it's when it in the sort of writing life aspect, and how when she was writing, there was really only one way to get published.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting reading a book like this, which knows nothing of the internet, really, or of phones, computers, a really new thing still. And like her experience is defined a lot by having an agent and having an editor and going that route, because at the time that was all pretty much all you could do, really. And that's just not the case anymore. Like, you have lots of different options, including going that same route. And yeah, that was interesting, because if someone wanted to write and just read this book and knew nothing about like the literature landscape these days, they could come away thinking that was the only option. When actually, I think one of the joys of writing these days is that as a writer, you can sort of, to a degree, pick and choose how you want to tackle publishing. Like, you can, per project, even think like what would make most sense for this book, and then pursue that particular route, whether it's finding a publisher and an agent, or self-publishing, or serializing it online, or however you want to do it. There's loads of options, and that kind of seemed like the main divergence, I suppose. And that's just purely a matter of the time in which it was written.
Sure. Tim, I have actually a question specifically for you as well, because Anne Lamott talks a lot about how traditional publication isn't actually going to solve all of the problems that you think it's going to solve. And as you're the only one amongst us who's traditionally published, I was curious, do you think that that's true? That people think it's going to solve all of these problems, and then you end up getting traditionally published, and it really doesn't end up solving that many problems?
Do you mind if I read a paragraph from the chapter?
Oh, sure.
Only because it's one of the best bits of writing I've ever read in any context. It's so fabulously to the point. Many non-writers assume that publication is a thunderously joyous event in the writer's life. They believe that if they themselves were to get something published, their lives would change instantly, dramatically, and for the better. Their self-esteem would flourish, all self-doubt would be erased like a typo. Entire paragraphs and manuscripts of disappointment and rejection and lack of faith would be wiped out by one push of the psychic delete button and replaced by a quiet, tender sense of worth and belonging. Then they could wrap the world in flame. That's just fabulous. It shows her sense of humour throughout the book, just elevates it from a great book to something even greater. But yeah, that the paragraphs like that rang very true to me. I think someone's talking about once upon a time there was just this one way to get published, and I don't know why we've held it up as being this extraordinary achievement to get traditionally published. I suppose perhaps because there were all those gatekeepers in a way, and it was a very narrow funnel. But there was certainly for me, there was an idea that it was going to be something life-changing, and it wasn't. And I think the best things that have come out of the publishing with my publisher have been the people, and honestly, working with my editor, working with my publisher. They're based in Oxford, the sort of bespoke publisher in Oxford. It's wonderful to go and visit them there and see all the people making good things. So so there's certainly good things about it, but this idea that overnight and on publishing day that your phone's going to be ringing off the hook and everyone's going to want interviews, and I think it's much wider than writing. Like all the things we talk about with writing, it's about human psyche. It's about ambition, and ambition essentially will thwart itself every single time. You see it in sports and in every walk of life. If you've you're aiming for something and thinking it's going to solve all your problems, you're going to be disappointed. And
Mm.
even if you get some great success, as Anne Lamott obviously has done in many times, but the thing is, the goalpost will always move anyway. If you get published by some great publisher, you'll want a better publisher, bigger publisher. If you get so many sales, you want more sales. There's always going to be somebody ahead of you. So ambition will always defeat itself, and I think publishing is prime for that kind of discouragement. And so ultimately, I think the answer, as Anne Lamott points out, and as I found the hard way, and it's an ongoing work. It's much harder said than done. But the only antidote, as far as I can see, is to get into the process and make the work itself and the dedication itself the founding satisfaction. And it's eminently doable because the work is satisfying, as hard as partly because it's so challenging. And so yeah, that's certainly the way I found it is but again, as you guys, it's the fact is it doesn't really matter. Ultimately, you've got to let go of the fruit of the endeavor anyway. So, and that's why I actually find you, the way you guys serialize, very attractive, because you're getting your work out there all the time, and presumably you don't you're not aiming just for this one kind of mountaintop that you'll never reach anyway.
Yeah, it kind of breaks it down into little pieces, so you're always having those little. It's like a little mini book launch every week almost. But yeah, rather than having this sort of totemic, impossible thing you're trying to reach for, that even if you get to it, you then discover it's maybe not quite the thing you expected it to be. You're just doing good work and satisfying stuff every week, and it kind of strips it back to what you were saying about it. Just becomes about the writing. It's less about the method that is getting out into the world, I suppose. And that's certainly what's worked for me.
Yeah, I definitely think it's worked for me as well. I think reducing the amount of friction between getting the words on page and then getting them out to people who might want to read them, I personally have found to be very, very useful, because um, even if I'm the only one who really wants to read it or whatever, it's still like it's out there for anyone, which I personally find to be very useful. And it gets you away from that perfectionism, which Anne Lamott talks about so much, right? Um,
Yeah, well, that's it. My sort of struggles as a writer, as it were, began with when I signed my book contract, because suddenly the perfectionism was just off the scale. It was suddenly I felt like I had to meet all these kind of standards that were imaginary, but really interfered with the freedom and the joy of just doing the thing. And so yeah. But hopefully, as I say, there are good people to be working with in publishing. That's been so there are good things about it, but certainly none of the sort of things we imagine, the prestige or any of that thing. Of course, we all sort of know that none of it counts for anything. But I think as soon as you experience it, then again you've learned that lesson that actually I may as well get on with the work and enjoy the work. But that's why maybe as you're saying, Simon, maybe picking the right vehicle for the particular project, these sort of hybrid ways of working could be really good for people going forwards.
Yeah, definitely. Also, your publisher, David Fickling Books, is amazing, because they also publish the Phoenix magazine in the UK, which is this incredible comic magazine for kids, which is just like the best young person's comic. So I'm always grateful to them for that. Something is like we've been talking a lot about process and the creation of the thing, and I feel like Anne Lamott's approach, and also what we've been saying, it's the importance of doing the writing and the doing of it over perhaps the finished product. And like you want to get to a finished product because that's kind of the evidence of the fact that you did it, but actually the doing of it is the important bit. And if you stay focused on that, that's kind of a healthy place to be as well, because then you're not focusing on the end product and sales or views or awards or whatever metric you stick on it. Like, you can't really put a metric on the writing. It's just the experience of doing it. Which it makes me also think of this kind of ongoing debate around generative AI and LLMs, which, regardless of any other ethical issues, just often seems to miss the point slightly for me, which is that actually the doing of the writing is the exciting bit and the satisfying bit. The fact that you get a book or a chapter at the end of that process is kind of like a happy accident rather than the point of it for me.
Yeah, I just got back, as both of you know, I just got back from Spain where I was at a conference for work. And a lot of the conversations were about AI and trying to use AI for testing. And one of the big things that I sort of was recognizing while I was there was like, well, it's great if you already know how to do it and then you can tell an AI to do it, right? But if you don't know how to go about doing XYZ and you just have AI do it for you, then you still don't know how to do it. You still don't know what the process is for you and how you would do it. So it feels like you're missing sort of this really important step of learning how to do the thing. And going back to your point of like the book is almost the byproduct of what you're doing. I think that like the process of developing the book is just like it makes it so much more worthwhile, and the fact that it will end up being flawed inevitably is just like part of the wonder of it, right? Is one of the more useful ways of thinking about writing, for me at least, is every book that you write is just practice for the perfect book. And so you write the book and it's done, and great, it's done. It's not perfect. It can never be perfect. So now it's time to try and make another perfect one if possible.
Yeah, and it's reflective of the person you were at the time when you wrote that particular project as well.
Yeah,
Like, I like the fact that the thing I wrote 10 years ago, I couldn't write it today because I'm
sure.
not the person I was 10 years ago, and it reflects all the things that my brain was processing at that particular moment in time. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we've been doing this for about 40 minutes now, about 30 minutes. Do we want to call it, or do we want to keep talking more about and Lamont? There's plenty more to talk about. I mean, uh, as I think Tim said, we could probably talk about this book for hours, but
Yeah. No, it's very, very good. I wonder, like, if people watching, like, how many of you have read Bird by Bird? If you stick it down in the chat, it'd be interesting to know if this is new to people or a well-known thing. I imagine if we have an American audience, that everyone's going to have read it, and if it's a UK audience, like me and Tim, would be like, "Oh, what is this thing?" Yeah. But no, I was really grateful to it. I found it quite reassuring. It felt like confirmation that I was heading in the right direction, wasn't prioritizing the wrong things, and yeah, just the fact that something written a while back still resonates, like, makes me think that writing as a thing, like, it's not really going anywhere. Like, it's something that people will do regardless of what technology happens to be doing in the background.
Yeah, no, I think that's a nice summation of the whole thing. Yes, it's practically useful, but just sort of psychologically encouraging, and yeah,
Yeah.
and a wonderfully wonderfully funny book as well. And yeah, thank you, Zach, for introducing us, because that was yeah, real 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 pleasure.
yeah, I'm glad you guys liked it so much. I'm always like hesitant to recommend that book because it's so specific to me and has been something that I've obviously read multiple times throughout my life. So every once in a while I worry about saying like, "Oh, this is my favorite book on writing." And then somebody to come along and say, "No, actually I didn't care for it and I think all of these things are wrong." It feels a little bit like an attack on me sometimes. But yeah, so do we want to do one more round of intros and then we can sign off? Does that sound good to everybody?
Yeah, let's do that. Zero, go first, Zach.
Sure. Yeah. Again, I'm Zach Hardy. ZK. I publish under ZK Hardy. My Substack is Inkdrift, and I have two newsletters that publish out of Inkdrift: Story Syntax, which is on programming and writing and the similarities there, and then Rainbow Station, which is a serialized science fiction novel about the building of a space station. Tim, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm Tim Hall. I publish under TK Hall at the moment, and my novels are the Blind Bowman trilogy, of which this is the first book, Shadow of the Wolf, which is a dark mythic reimagining of the Robin Hood legends. And I also write the Wildwood Rising Substack.
Yeah, I've read the first one. It's really good.
Oh, thanks, Simon.
Just realising we all have a K initial in the middle of our names.
We do.
So yeah, I'm Simon. I write the Write More with Simon K. Jones newsletter, where I talk a lot about serialization and writing in general. And as part of that, I publish Tales from the Triverse, which is this ongoing serial. So it's kind of proof of the stuff I'm talking about, that hopefully I know what I am talking about, but people can use that to judge if the other half of the newsletter is worth reading or not. But yeah, you come and say hi.
Which it very much is. It's, but I think we there was a lot more we could talk about in this subject, wasn't there? I think I did think about your Write More message quite a lot while I was reading Bird by Bird, because it's very much it's key, isn't it, to go. And I think, Zach, you've said the similar thing. You know, you've got to keep putting those things down, and it's ongoing training then. And particularly if you can publish alongside, then yeah, I think it's a key message.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And on that note, I should probably go and do some writing.
Yes.
Same. All right. Thanks, guys.
Brilliant. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks, everybody.